Hey guys, welcome to May 21st edition of How to Get the Job Q&A. My name is Tony Martin, and if you don't subscribe to my YouTube channel, Hired How to Get the Job, or Instagram or Facebook, you should. And you should also check out my blog over there at howtogetthejob.blog. Now, today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Usually, I kind of just jump into a discussion about a topic, and then we start doing questions and answers. And today, I want to do something a little different. As I was just getting some articles and reading some articles this week about employment numbers and about where the market is in general. So, first of all, I want to let you guys know that it looks like this past week, another 2.2 to 2.4 million people filed for unemployment, first time filing for unemployment. And that brings our total number from the middle of March up to 38.6 million people are filed for unemployment. So to give you some perspective, at the beginning of March, if you were to take those labor numbers and look where we are today, about 23.7% of the labor participation force of March 1st is now unemployed. So what does that mean? That means roughly 1 out of every 4.2 people in the US are currently looking for a job. That is staggering statistics. That is Great Depression type numbers. And not to be the total Debbie Downer, the good news is that this is the 7th week in a row that these first time claims have declined. So that's encouraging. And the peak, I think the most claims were the last week of March, where it was 6.9 million people filed in the last week of March. So since the last week of March, we've had 7 weeks in a row of first time claims declining. So that's encouraging. And I wanted to show you guys a chart. And I could show it to you like this, but I can barely do something better with all of my technology. I can just show you on my computer. So this is from LinkedIn, obviously LinkedIn hiring rate. And if you didn't figure it out, LinkedIn obviously aggregates a lot of data. They post a lot of jobs so they can see when the market is declining and when job postings have increased, and when people get hired, the companies then close out the job. So here you can see year over year change, and don't be fooled, that's 0, so that's breaking even. And this is 50% decline and a 75% decline. And we can look at our individual countries here. So while I'm looking at this, there are a couple spikes here. This blue line is China. Now, just so you know, there's 2 celebrations in China that are seasonable. So these peaks of hiring actually happen during their Labor Day and their Qingming Festival time of year. In the US and around the world, this little peak of hiring is really around Easter. But outside of that, you can really just kind of see that there's a consistent trough here for the US. We're yellow and the UK is red. But you can see that it looks like, according to LinkedIn, that we have finally hit the bottom of this little trough of unemployment and inactivity, I guess is the right word. Of course, time will tell. You know, we have to see how the next weeks work out, if we start going up or if it's just little spikes. But with the seasons changing, hopefully now there'll be some more opportunities coming out there. So that was the first article I wanted to share with you guys. The second thing was also from LinkedIn. There's a guy on LinkedIn. He's part of their team, the LinkedIn editorial team, I guess, Andrew Seaman, and he always has good insights as to what's going on in the job market. So certainly you should follow him. You should read his stuff. It'll give you some good indications of what's going on. And this week he had an article, and it's actually really relevant because I'm going to be talking with a couple of questions today about changing jobs and things like that. But it was the comment was, or the article was about essential workers. And right now people are really trying to figure out what is essential. And LinkedIn is seeing a lot of employment activity or a lot of application activity happen around those essential fields, and not so much around the non-essential fields. And what they deem as essential is kind of what our government has deemed as essential, which is, you know, grocery stores, hardware stores, and pet supply stores. Since April, those applications rose 29% than they had in February, before the pandemic, really. Non-essential stores like department stores and clothing stores, those sort of things have seen a 39% decrease in application submissions. So the point of this article, though, is discussing you really shouldn't really time the market or be too concerned about that. I mean, for all of us, and me included, who are in oil and gas, even though it was a very volatile market, you'd always thought the world needed oil to sustain its way of life. And now look at us, there's no energy demand. So and there's no one driving anywhere. Now that's gradually changing as we're opening up, thank goodness. But things that are essential aren't always so even and easy to see. And I mean, even, you think about medical. Well, medical is obviously an essential need, especially during a pandemic, but there's been a lot of furloughs and layoffs in the medical field because the government said you can't do non-essential surgeries. So a lot of these nurses who are at outpatient facilities or different types of procedures that aren't essential, they're shut down. A dentist, everyone needs to go to a dentist. But right now, guess what? You can't, which means those office employees again. So it's really difficult to figure out what's essential and what's not essential. So I want to make sure that you're certainly aware that it's tough to time the market to figure out what's essential. I mean, I remember that I think a common theme was you can always count on like alcohol sales, especially during a market decline. And that's a safe haven. So, Coors and Budweiser and Miller Lite, those are the places to go, right? Well, frankly, right now, no, because bars have closed. So what does that mean? Those safe havens of alcohol, there was an article I read that it said, 20,000 gallons of stale beer has been sent now to distilleries to be refined into hand sanitizer, which means at least the product's being used somewhere, but there's not a big demand for people to buy beer in order to make a hand sanitizer. So those safe havens aren't always as relevant as real as we think they are. I have a buddy who works for a very big energy company, and I'll tell you, 3 months ago they would kill to be able to sell one of their treatment facilities that dealt with making hand sanitizer, as well as other chemicals like that. Now it's an unbelievably booming economy. So my point being is that we don't really know where the safe havens are. So as you're trying to figure out where you should be tweaking and moving into your next career field, if you want to try to get out of what you're doing, make sure it's something you're really passionate about outside of it being a safe haven, because that's really just as important, frankly, at the end of the day, because you want to make sure that you have a long tenure there and it's not just something that you're doing to provide for your family, because it may not last either. And now you go 3 years down the road in a career you weren't passionate about, in a field you didn't really like, and it's going to be tougher to get back to what you were passionate about. So with that, again, thanks so much for joining us. If you have a question or a comment, always, please put them while I'm talking. I will do my best. I am not very bright. I am not very strong at reading something and speaking something else at the same time. I need to get a staff under me so I can start doing this correctly, this type of environment. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I will pause what I'm doing and come back to it. If I don't see it, it's now like way up there, ask it again. I'll try to get to it. So what I wanted to share with everyone today, though, was this week I had a phenomenal client. He is a executive in marketing and public relations up in the northwestern part of the United States. And honestly, I haven't done a marketing resume in a really long time. And it was clear that he, over his 20 years, hadn't really put much effort into his resume because he was just struggling to put this thing together. And while I was doing it with him over these past couple of days, and we got the product out this morning, so we started Tuesday and we finished today. It was a really quick turnaround. I wrote down a lot of the successes, I should say, that we were able to overcome or create, and a lot of the challenges he had. So one of the things is first of all, it's a general rule of thumb. A resume should not look like you're busy. A resume should convey that you're important, okay? And what I mean by that is that his resume showed that he had done a lot of things, but none of them were accomplishments. He created a social media platform. Okay, well, did anyone follow it? As someone that's trying to create a social media platform, I realize how difficult it is to get people to follow you and people to stay engaged with you. So, that was the first thing that we talked about, was let's take away all the busy stuff and let's pull in all the accomplishments. It's a really honest theme or obvious theme that we talk about a lot, but if you're not used to this, you don't think about it. The next, he had a bullet, and the bullet said something like, I stay engaged with clients on a regular basis, and I increase revenue by $500,000. Now, I think there was two bullets there. One was increasing revenue by $500,000, and one was talking to clients. If your resume has a job and you have 5 or 6 bullets in there, and one of them is talking about significant contributions like a $500,000 increase in revenue to the bottom line, and then one bullet below it, it's talking about a mundane activity or detail, those should not be part of the same job, okay? Because what's happening now is someone like me has a 50-50 shot. Am I gonna scan the 500K bullet, or am I scanning the mundane bullet? Because I guarantee you I'm not reading this thing line by line. So that's why that general rule of thumb comes into place again, where you want 75% of your bullets on your resume to be substance, okay? The next piece of advice that I gave him was he had a really, really impressive bullet for a job that he hated. And frankly, a job he wasn't in for very long, and he didn't do very well in this role, okay? Now, we could say it was his fault, or we can say it was the company's fault, or it was the culture, or whatever, but the bottom line, in this job, he would say, I failed. Now, on his resume, he has 3 bullets, and one of those bullets, and I'll read it to you because I wrote it down before we deleted it. I wrote it down, and it said, measured and reported performance of all marketing campaigns to management team and assessed these against the goals of ROIs and KPIs. Now that sounds really impressive, and it did. And I said, hey, this is really good. Can you give me more on this? And he said, truthfully, it wasn't a really good job. We didn't do very well. I quit in 6 months because I didn't like it. I go, okay. We need to erase this bullet, because if I'm going to hire you and I'm going to read this on your resume, and I'd be like, hey, that's really cool. Tell me more about that. And that's your response. I hated the job. It sucked and I didn't do well. You need to get rid of the bullet, even though it sounds good, because at the end of the day, all it says is, hey, you can write a good bullet. You want your bullets on your resume to be the gateway to good conversation and good stories. So I don't care how good it sounded. If it is not going to lead you to a really upbeat and fun topic or an exciting thing that you accomplished, then you need to get rid of that bullet, because it might lead you down a terrible path. Sorry about that. So be aware that the content of your resume is important. The quality of your resume bullets are important, but the story that those bullets will lead you to are crucial, because once you get in that door, if you can't portray being a person that is positive and upbeat and has accomplished stuff, you're setting yourself up for failure. And there's too many challenges out there already, frankly, when it comes to interviewing, to not allow yourself to try to give you every advantage, okay? So with that, we'll start doing the questions that I received this week. And again, if you have any questions, please put in the bottom. And also, if you're watching and you think someone might benefit this from, share this. We're gonna go for, thanks Dawn, I love it too. We're gonna go for our 15 or 20 minutes here. So if there's anybody in your network you think that might appreciate this topics or these questions that other people have asked, start sharing this right now so we can push this out there and I can help more people. But with that, so first question I got this week. I was furloughed, and this actually came from me from someone I met earlier on yesterday, and I just didn't want to say their name because it's a small network in our neighborhood and stuff like that. But I was furloughed, and I expect to come back to work with my company. But should I start looking somewhere else or start looking now? Now, that was a great question. So ultimately, you're on a furlough, you expect to come back. What should you do? Well, I'm a big believer that having more opportunities is better than less opportunities, and I'm a big believer that you need to give yourself options, okay? So if you don't give yourself options, you need to be sure that you are very confident that this is gonna come back and you're gonna be working in this company again very soon. Now with that, you know the company culture, you know your boss, you know your team. If your company is pretty honest and saying, look, you're furloughed. We expect to bring you back in 2 months. However, we're fully open to the fact that you might be looking, and this is no reflection of us. I would say put some feelers out there, network a little. Do not change your LinkedIn profile to saying open and available looking for a job, but I certainly, because it's a small world, be careful, but I certainly would be selective on the companies I'm looking at and trying to make sure that that if I really was interested in making a move, there's a good opportunity now to at least network in with these organizations. So so again, yes, I'd start looking. I wouldn't broadcast it. I'd be very selective on who I talk to. But I certainly would take this opportunity to network. Let's see, Horatio, when they ask for salary expectations, I've always said I've had an open mind about it, and I'm sure the company offers a competitive compensation package for the role. Do you think it's the best way to go about? So yeah, no, Horatio, great question. And I love this question because this is one of my favorite questions. It's a salary compensation question. How do you answer salary compensation questions? This is what you do. First of all, you should know what the job pays before you apply the job or before you get the first phone call, okay? And how you do that, you go to payscale.com, you go to Indeed, salary.com, and Glassdoor. Those 4 websites. You can then search in those websites that role and even maybe that company and what it pays. So before the question's even asked, you have an idea that this role is going to pay between $75,000 and $95,000 or something like that. Then when you get the question, because you're always going to get it, and you very often you get it on that first interview. That first interview is a phone screen, and if you don't answer that first interview phone screen correctly, you don't get passed on to the next person. In this market, Horatio, there is, what did we just say, 37 million people looking for a job. If I'm a phone screener and I call 10 people, 5 of them are going to give me a number, 3 of those numbers are going to be good, 5 of those people are not going to give me any number, and they're going to say, well, I figure whatever's good is good. I am not moving forward with the 5 people that couldn't give me a number. It is too much of a risk to bring you all the way to the end of a process to find to get to the end of the process to then find out you don't want to take the job. I've now wasted my executive team's time, the hiring manager, I've wasted countless hours. So here's how you answer that question. Oh, and Don, the websites again are payscale.com, salary.com, Glassdoor, and Indeed. And afterwards, always come back to this. I always post this up on my YouTube channel, so feel free to subscribe to that. All these will always be there. Hired How to Get the Job on YouTube. And so when you get that question, you say, look, I've done my research, and from what I can tell, I think this job pays somewhere around $80,000. Based on what I've seen in the market, that seems pretty accurate. Now, it's going to do 2 things. First of all, it's going to show them that you're educated about the role, okay? Secondly, it's going to show that you're actually trying to tell them what you think you know, and you're not saying, I do know, I think I know this. You're showing humility, and it just feels better when someone hears that. And it lets you get an opportunity to maybe solicit some advice from the recruiter. So I forgot the number I said, but if you said $70,000 a year, and their recruiter's like, well, actually, you're right, but we're coming out of COVID-19. Everyone's taking a pay cut in our company. It's actually $65,000 a year. It gives you a very easy position to go, oh yeah, you know what? That makes sense. I'm open to it, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't shut the door down. But if you say, I am looking for $70,000 a year, it is very difficult to come back from that statement and accept 65. The other thing by saying that, what it does for you is, let's say you've said $70,000 a year is what you think the position should pay. They say, great, you move on to the next level. Now, a month later, the process is over. You've gone through 5 interviews and you get your offer. And guess what? Your offer says $70,000 a year. You then can very easily and comfortably say, well, I'm hoping for 75. Whoa, but Horatio, you said you were looking for 70. No. A month ago, I knew this much about the job. And from what I knew, the job should pay this much. But now it actually turns out what I thought was a team of 5 is a team of 9. What I thought was having a small budget of $5,000 is actually a big budget of $25,000. I'm in charge of this strategy. You're implementing a new ERP system. I have all these things, just like you learned about me over the past month, I learned a little bit more about you over the past month. And that's kind of what I'm thinking. Now, doesn't mean you're not going to take 70, but it gives you the opportunity to come back later. So that's how I always suggest phrasing the question. And the last piece of advice that I think probably my regulars will be sick of hearing is never give a range, but it bears repeating every single week. If you're looking for $100,000 a year and you say, I think the job should, or I'm looking for 90 to 110 because you're really looking for 100, the employer heard you will accept $90,000 a year. They didn't hear 91, 92, 100, 110. They heard you will accept between 90 and 110. So why on earth would they offer you 110? That's $20,000 that they don't need to spend. They can keep you for 6 months to a year, and then come salary time, hopefully then give you a 10% increase. And guess what? Then you're still not at $100,000 a year, but you had a huge increase. So be very careful with how you phrase it. If you give ranges, keep it very tight. All right. Thanks for the question. Alex from Cyprus. This is the changing industries question. He is a sales guy, technical sales individual. And how do you change industries from oil and gas to medical? Now, he wanted to, we talked about this. So he was looking to get into medical sales. And I say the first thing you need to do is reformat your resume, because if you're doing technical sales, there's often engineering discussions that so if you're a technical salesperson in the oil and gas, often you're not the ones designing the solution. You have engineers behind you that are going to then come in and design the solution, and you're going to sell it. So first I would discuss that I can do things on my own, that I don't need a team of salespeople behind me or engineer support behind me. I would change my specific equipment references to generic equipment references. So that way you're talking more about technical equipment, not I sold a BOP, or I sold hydrorackers, or mud pumps, or whatever. You're trying to make it more generic so it relates. So that's the first thing you'd want to do. Next is you want to connect with those companies that you're interested in, and make sure that you try to network into those. So just like we've talked about in the past, you should go on LinkedIn, you should try to connect with people in those companies, and you should always solicit advice from people who are in that value chain of the kind of industry or the kind of role you want to be in. And when you solicit advice, you're never saying, I need a job. You are never saying that. You are never asking somebody in a blanket email, can you do something for me? No, that's not the way to do it. You email people and you say, or you LinkedIn message them and say, thanks so much for connecting to me. You've obviously been at, I'm just gonna make up a company, at Water Bottle Industries for 10 years. You have a really impressive background. I would really value your expert advice on my background for this type of role, or something like that. Now that's before the job even exists. That's how you're networking in there. And what that does is it strokes somebody's ego. I've said this before. We all love to talk about what we think we know about. And I love doing this because I love coaching and helping people. And other people don't have this outlet. Other people need an outlet sometimes to be able to pour into somebody else and feel like they're actually giving back. You've now allowed that person the outlet to actually feel like they're getting respected and listened to and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of how I approach that. But that's what you should be doing as you're building your network. Look at the companies you want to join. Look at the roles that are similar to what you're trying to do. And then when you do that, try at the same time then to find those key contacts in that organization that can hopefully benefit you. Also, I wrote an article about cold calling your resume. I actually put in that article, and that's at howtogetthejob.blog, my blog, cold calling your resume article actually has email templates that you could just copy and paste into your LinkedIn. I believe, I could be wrong here, but I believe I even made them the right character amount if you were trying to do a LinkedIn message to someone you're not connected with. So you try to connect with them, I think it's 250 characters or less. To send a message out with the LinkedIn request. So go there, check that out. That should hopefully help you, Alex, as well, and anyone else. Karen in Houston, I've been trying to apply out of state, but I never get any hits. What would be the best approach to applying to an out of state role? Now, this is very similar to Alex's question. You need to connect in with people into the organization or companies that you're trying to apply with, okay? Always do that. Networking is key, especially right now where I heard this week that on average, there's 1,000 applicants per role that's posted on LinkedIn. That is crazy town. I'm used to dealing with 300 to 400, okay? But 1,000, which means, first of all, we'll get to that in a second, but make sure you're applying to jobs that are 1, 2, or 3 days old. Okay, certainly post to other stuff or apply to other stuff too. But if it's more than 3 days old, there's a very small likelihood they're even going to see your application. So be on those job boards, be on them regularly. But in Karen's case, she wants to move out of state, right? You need to, on the first line of your resume, and I'm never prepared for these sort of things. You should have, fold a resume here so you can't see who it is, but you should have a, executive summary. That first line on the executive summary should be, I'm really excited, energetic, talented HR professional with 20 years of experience, excited about the HR generalist role in Atlanta, Georgia at Xerox or whatever. Put in that very first line that you're aware that the job is located there, okay? Now, there's two answers for this next part of the question. Are you going to pay for your own relocation, or are you expecting them to? Pre-COVID-19, I would have just left it at that. And then when they called me up, we would have discussed relocation. Post-COVID-19, when they asked me, are you open to relocation and are you open to paying for it yourself? I would have to say something like, yeah, I'm absolutely open to having the conversation about me relocating myself to Atlanta, Georgia. And you didn't say, again, this is a trick of words. You never said you will pay for your relocation. But you said, yeah, I'm absolutely open to paying for the relocation, for me to relocate to Atlanta, Georgia. Because there's 1,000 people out there that are already living there. So you have to make it right now really intriguing as to why they would want to pick you over somebody else who is living in their own back door. Because as a hiring manager, I already know that there's at least a 10% increase in the upfront cost to hire somebody out of state to get them over here. So you better be awesome at what you do. There better be a few people that can actually do what you do, or you're as flexible as possible in showing them that you're able to relocate. But that's really the best thing. I mean, that's always a challenge even before this market environment that we live in now. And that's going to continue to be a challenge for sure. But hopefully that helps you a little bit, Karen. I'd also do it on my cover letter as well, just so you know. Will the cover letter get read? Maybe 10% of the time. But 10% of the time is better than not having one and it never getting read. So in my cover letter, I'd also put the same thing. As you notice, I live in Houston, Texas. However, I have family in Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia in 2005, and I love the city and I can't wait to get back. Something, alleviate the concern, because there are so many applications out there that a recruiter is not going to call you back if they have too many questions, because they want to call you for the questions that they're asked or scripted to ask. They don't want to call you trying to figure out the 15 questions that are already answered for some other applicant, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, feel free, Karen, to follow up with me this week. I know you will. James and Katie, I am wordy and tend to have longer bullets and more of them. How many bullets should I have in a resume? Now, James is my boy because I am wordy. Every article, little dark secret about me, every article on how to get the job.blog has been trimmed immensely by my wife, my editor-in-chief, because without her, I'd be nothing. And nobody would ever read any of it because it would take you an hour to get to the point. So James, I'm with you. So first of all, you need to make sure that for a role that you've been at for less than a year, there's lots of scenarios here, but if you've been in any company for more than 2 years, and then you have some roles that are 6 months or 8 months or 9 months, and hopefully you don't have a whole bunch, but if you have a couple, you can't put 5, 6, 7 bullets of huge accomplishments that you did in 6 months, because you know what? It makes the rest of your resume look like crap. And what I mean by that is, how could you have accomplished so much in 6 months? It makes the rest of your stuff less trustworthy. Because if you're really truthful and honest, how much can you really accomplish in 2 or 3 months or 6 months or 9 months? So I would say if you've been somewhere between 6 months and 12 months or less, 2, 3 bullets, maybe 4 at the most. Because again, remember, you don't want bullets that show you were busy. You want bullets that show you accomplished something. Otherwise, you just look like a guy that gets paid money to do a lot of work and not accomplish anything, and nobody wants to hire that guy or girl. So bullets, I would say, and then if you've been somewhere for, 5 years, 6 years, as long as those bullets are accomplishments, you could have 6, 7, or 8. I probably wouldn't go more than 8 because then they're just not very scannable. And that 75%, 25% rule, 75% accomplishments, 25% just kind of have to have some of the stuff in there. You'd be removing all of those, I hope. I hope it would just be 100% accomplishments if you have more than 6 bullets. So hopefully that helps. And Okay. And then Edward and Spring, I've always had a job, and for the past 30 years, I'm looking for the first time. What are some tips and advice you can give me? Edward, it depends. If you've been working for 30 years, it depends on what job you have, okay? And and let me say this with full humility, that we all have different roles to play, and we all have different passions. But if you've been we'll just say a receptionist for 30 years, and I know people who are career receptionists, they like the schedule, they have a family, they're concerned about getting home on time with the kids. So they are very structured. They get there at 7 a.m., they leave at 5 p.m., and the job doesn't bleed outside of that. So there's reasons for that, right? But if that's your job for the past 30 years, I don't care if you've been at 50 companies or one company, there's probably not a lot of differences between your day-to-day, okay? So in general, I would think that you've probably done the same thing over and over and over again for 30 years in different companies. And you should never repeat bullets, okay? If you've done something that's on your resume, we know you can do it. I don't need to know that you were able to manage someone's calendar 13 times over 30 years between different companies. Don't need to know it. So if you're in a lower level role where you don't have much responsibility, a shorter resume is probably appropriate. I might struggle to get it all on one page because it's so much content. And at this point, I would go more probably with a functional resume, especially if you have a lot of jobs. This is a really in-depth question. And we're running out of time because you guys aren't listening very well. But a functional resume, right, where you put your jobs in order of what you're looking for. For example, okay, if you have done, if you're an administrative assistant, okay, you've done budgeting, you've probably done organizational, helped you organize your boss, you've done travel arrangements, you've done executive management, you've probably worked at boards of directors. Those are individual sections on your resume. They're functions of your job. And then you've put a couple, 2, 3 bullets underneath each one of those, highlighting your best accomplishments in there. That's probably the best way to go if you're going to be a 30-year person who honestly hasn't had much upward momentum in their career. If you're an executive, I'm okay with a functional resume too, depending on what you're applying to, because sometimes what you're applying to was something you did 6 years ago. So let's just say you're the chief operating officer of XYZ Corporation. But you really loved it when you were a VP over marketing, okay? Well, the last time you were a VP over marketing was 10 years ago, but that's your passion and you love it. So if you put it in a chronological order, it's going to be on the end of page 1, maybe page 2. It's not going to be the top thing. So you want to do a functional resume there, and you want to put it, the marketing experience or, expertise in marketing or whatever on the top. And that really allows you then to highlight the marketing experience. But there's always challenges with functional resumes because you can't just naturally tell timelines. If you have a chronological resume, you did this job from June 1st of 20 to June 1st of 2021, the timeline is 12 months. So when you say I increased revenue by 18%, that's a good enough bullet. In a functional resume, I have no idea the timeline. I don't know if it was 12 months or 12 years, so you actually have to add more words. So a functional resume has a tendency to be a little bit more wordy because the chronological, the way it's laid out and the formatting of it kind of answers the questions. You don't have to highlight every single time. And I have more questions today, but looks like Carissa asked, I've also heard that for companies you worked at for more than 10 years ago, you should have a limiting number of bullets. Do you agree? So this will be my disclaimer. A resume is only, or I should say the advice you get is only as good from the person you receive it. If the hiring manager that you are looking to get hired by said that, then yes, I agree with it. If it's just general in terms, I think if it's impressive, Carissa, if it highlights something that you haven't done since, maybe 10 years ago you were a CPA and you were over a much larger organization than you have been in the past 10 years. And that gave you, or maybe you were an auditor and that gave you more exposure and experience. It just depends. If that exposure and experience that you did 10 years ago is going to qualify you for the job you're applying for today, well, then maybe it needs to be longer than the job you just came from. So it's not a black and white answer. But the truth is I hear that a lot, and I hear from people that are my peers in this world, and it's just an opinion. So it's everyone's opinion. So I'm gonna say with full grayness that I'm not sure. I would say personally, I've worked for, as a staffing recruiting manager, I've worked for a couple companies. As an executive search professional, I've worked for a few dozen companies. I have never had a COO, chairman, board member, CEO tell me, I don't like that resume, it's too long. I've never had them tell me that. I've had them tell me, I don't like these gaps in the resume and I don't like certain things about the resume, but never that it's been too long. Or really, the bottom line, if every bullet on your resume doesn't repeat, if they bring value, then I would say you're probably okay. And maybe what happens then too is maybe then you shrink a couple of jobs between the 10-year ago job and the today job. Maybe you shrink a couple of the less relevant ones, so that one's bigger. So hopefully that answers your question. I had a couple more questions to get to. I'll try to get to them on Instagram. So if you don't know, follow me on Instagram as well. But the other questions I'm not going to have time to get to are, what are some strategies to job seekers? Right, you know what? I need to answer this question. This is an important question. So you're on, just hang in there, or feel free to leave. But what are some strategies that job seekers can take right now to land them a job? This is just too important of a question not to at least touch on it a little bit. First of all, make sure your LinkedIn profile and your resume match. I don't mean word for word. I don't mean that everything that's on your resume is on your LinkedIn profile verbatim. What I'm saying is that you're saying the dates on your LinkedIn profile complement the dates on your resume, okay? Make sure your titles complement. I can't tell you how many times I've had a resume in front of me and it says he's the VP of HR. And then I look down the LinkedIn profile and it says he's the director of HR. Now, I have a tendency to believe LinkedIn because LinkedIn is public to his company and the resume is only public to me because he sent it to me privately. So make sure that they complement each other and they don't contradict each other, because I have a tendency to believe whichever is the lower one, okay? Just as a professional. Next, your resume again should be filled in with success stories. We talked about this, but your resume should lead you to a good story. Every bullet on your resume, I can't tell you how many times I've had this happen to me, where I call a guy and I say, hey, tell me more about this bullet. And then he can't talk about it. Like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, like, you didn't write this, did you? Well, no, I didn't. So make sure you know what your resume says. Make sure you know the numbers behind your resume. If your resume says you grew revenue by 25%, and then when you get interviewed, you say you grew it by 20%, know your numbers. Just like when you're in sales, you know the prices that you're selling products at, know your numbers. So make sure your resume is filled in with success stories. Make sure every one of those bullets is going to be able to you're going to be able to then share a success story. If a bullet has a negative connotation, even if it's written well, delete it. If they ask you to expand on that bullet and your answer is, well, I really didn't like it there and I didn't do a very good job and this is what I was in charge of, but honestly we failed, get rid of the bullet. I don't care how well it's written. Just have a vanilla bullet about that job and move on with your life, and they will too. Because we all understand, if you're not a salesperson, and that was the case for my client this week up in Northwest US, he is not a sales guy. He is a PR person, public relations person, and a marketing person. He tried out sales for a very short period of his career 3 years ago, before he's in his current job, and he hated it. But it was 6 months, and it was a recent role. So he had to put it on there, but I certainly didn't want him highlighting it, and I certainly didn't want him highlighting it with bad stories. So that's that. Apply to roles that are posted in the last few days. We've just talked about that. Remember, if a job has been posted in more than 3 days ago, still apply to it if you're a fit, but realize the likelihood of you getting a call back is very slim because there's 1,000 people on average applying to every single role available right now. And it's always okay, in my opinion, to reach out to the HR recruiter on the team who looks like he's handling this position or she's handling this position. It's also okay to reach out to the hiring manager. But once you've applied to the job, when you reach out to the hiring manager, when you reach out to the recruiter, you're not asking them for an interview. You're not asking them for the job. You're simply asking them to take a look at your resume, and you would appreciate their expert opinion as to how your credentials stack up, or how your gaps align, or if they think you'd be a good fit or something like that. There's more to it than that. I have some articles about that as well. And as always, one of the best ways to keep working toward getting a new job, expand your LinkedIn network, expand your professional network, look for happy hours. The market is opening up again. We're now breathing again, both figuratively and literally. We're breathing around each other again. Feel free to go to some of these different groups and networking groups to try to meet people that are in your same discipline and same area of expertise. So with that, we went long today, I'm sorry, but thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. I appreciate the questions I got this week. As always, tomorrow, if you want to see someone stumble through Instagram, subscribe to my Instagram account, same as this, Hired How to Get the Job, and I will try to recap these questions in 15 seconds or less, which is always kind of fun. Sometimes I go over, but often I just mess up the graphics and things like that. And subscribe to my YouTube channel. This will get posted over there. All of my Q&As from every single week get posted over there. I was actually talking to my wife today about it, and it's interesting. I think this is my 6th or 7th Q&A, and I would say maybe I repeat myself maybe 10% of the time. So that means that 90% of the content every single week was not repeated from week to week. So certainly take a look over there if you do have more questions. And lastly, please share this with anyone that you think can benefit from it. I do resume writing. I do interviewing, mock interviews to help people. I love it. It's a passion of mine. I turn more people away than I do accept, meaning I'll look at their resume and go, you know what? You don't need to pay me anything. Let me just give you some free advice. I always love helping people. And with that, thanks for everyone for joining me today. Look forward to catching up with you next week. And as always, you have any questions, send them my way. God bless you guys. Take care.